He jumped in front of the arrows aimed at the alien queen and saved her. The reward was worth every scar. Jace Marin always knew he'd die in a diplomatic disaster. He just figured there'd be more coffee involved. Or maybe poison. Something elegant, something with ceremony. Not arrows. Definitely not arrows. The air in Navaris shimmered with heat and tension. The city floated on turbines 3 miles above the poisoned Earth, a marvel of compromise between Earth's engineers and the Alari's biomechanical architects. Spires jutted skyward like teeth, and banners of both worlds fluttered from air bridges that groaned under the weight of protocol. Jace tugged at his collar, cursed the synthetic wool, and scanned the plaza. 100 dignitaries milled about, their translators buzzing in their ears. Peace Day, the humans called it. The Alari had no word for peace, not exactly. The closest translation was the stillness before storms. Comforting. Why are you even here? Lieutenant Gresh muttered beside him. You're a logistics guy. You move boxes. I move boxes strategically, Jace said. Besides, I figured I'd get a selfie with the Queen before she vaporizes us all. Gresh snorted. You and every conspiracy theorist with a blog. They weren't the only ones curious. Queen Saravan stood atop the jade platform at the center of the plaza, her long ears like obsidian crescents against her silver crown. Her gown shimmered with dark matter threads, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. She didn't smile, she didn't wave, she just watched. She looked human. Mostly. If humans were carved out of cold fire and cosmic judgment, her expression said she'd rather be anywhere else, possibly on a battlefield, possibly disintegrating Earth's leadership. Jace liked her instantly. The ambassador began his speech, something about unity, progress, shared futures. Jace stopped listening after the fourth synergy. He was debating whether to sneak away for a snack drone when the first arrow flew. It cut through the air with a high-pitched hum, brighter than it should have been, trailing static. Plasma fused. Alari tech, but crudely copied. Illegal. Jace didn't think. He saw the arrow, saw the Queen standing perfectly still and moved. He didn't know how many arrows there were. His brain counted 3 before his body stopped counting. His shoulder burned. His ribs collapsed inward like a cheap tent. Something sharp kissed his thigh. His face hit cold stone, and everything turned sideways. He heard screams, shouts, energy weapons discharging. Someone yelled, "The Queen," and another yelled, "Medic," and someone else yelled, "What idiot jumps into arrows?" Someone touched his neck. Cold fingers. He flinched, then froze. Not fingers. Claws? No, just nails. Long, black alien. "Stay still," a voice said, and he tried to say, "No problem, Your Majesty," but his mouth just gurgled. Everything smelled like burnt metal and ozone. The Queen leaned close. Her face was expressionless. Not concern, not fear, just analysis. Her eyes flicked to the arrow embedded in his shoulder. "Primitive," she said. "I've had worse. Once on Varnus Prime, a Warthox impaled me with its tail." "Cool," Jace gasped. "Love Warthox tails." She tilted her head. "You attempted to protect me. Illogical. You are unarmored, untrained, and judging by your personnel file, prone to insubordination." "Yeah," he said, blinking. "But I'm fast." The medics arrived, pushing her aside. One human, one Alari. The human looked panicked. The Alari looked bored. "He's conscious," the human medic said. "That's a bad sign. Means the pain receptors are fried." "Should I shock him again?" the Alari asked. "No," Jace croaked. "Bad idea. Very bad, especially if it involves your weird glowing needles." The Queen watched the scene with a curious intensity. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. The last thing Jace saw before the pain pulled him under was her silhouette against the hovering sun, long ears cutting the sky. When he woke up, he expected to be dead or, at the very least, gloriously comatose. Instead, he was in a chamber that smelled like lavender and ionized copper. Machines hummed around him, tubes snaked into his arms, and a translucent mesh pulsed over his chest. A small floating orb hovered nearby. It blinked once. "You are awake," it said in a dry, bureaucratic voice. "Congratulations. You are now medically stable and politically complicated." Jace groaned. "Where the hell am I?" "Aboard the Virulenth, flagship of Her Majesty Queen Saravan. You were transferred following your unsanctioned act of heroism." "Unsanctioned? You did not file paperwork." "Oh, well, sorry. Next time I'll submit Form 9B before heroically throwing myself into deadly projectiles." The orb beeped. "Sarcasm detected. Logging for personality profile." The door slid open without a sound. Queen Saravan entered, flanked by 2 guards with facial expressions set permanently to murder. "Human," she said. "Jace Marin, your injuries were extensive. Your recovery is sufficient." "Thank you," he said, trying to sit up and immediately regretting it. "You intercepted 3 plasma arrows. 1 penetrated your lung, another shattered your clavicle. The third found its way somewhere unpleasant." "Yeah, I noticed." She didn't smile. "You are alive. That is statistically improbable." He grinned. "I'm good at defying odds. Also, I eat a lot of fiber." The guards twitched. One almost drew a weapon. Saravan raised a hand. "Leave us." They obeyed without question. The queen walked closer, hands clasped behind her back. "You interfered in royal security. You broke protocol. You disrupted a peace summit." "You're welcome." She studied him. "According to Aelari law, when one saves the life of royalty, a bond is formed, a life debt. You are now under protection, an obligation." Jace blinked. "Obligation?" "To serve until the bond is fulfilled." "So what, I'm your bodyguard now?" "In a manner of speaking. You will accompany me. Train, learn, fight." He frowned. "I'm not exactly Jedi material, Your Majesty. You will adapt. I have bad knees. Unfortunate." There was a long silence. Then she said, "You are the first human to receive the Queen's debt. This will cause ripples." "I always wanted to make waves," Jace muttered. She turned to leave, then paused. "Also, you will need new clothes. Yours were incinerated." The Aelari medics were amused. "Fantastic." She vanished through the door. Leaving him alone with the sarcastic orb, it beeped again. "Reminder, your next appointment is with the royal trainer in 6 hours. What happens if I skip it?" "Death." Jace sighed and flopped back against the alien mattress, wincing. He stared at the ceiling, which shifted colors slowly, like a lazy jellyfish. "Yep," he muttered. "Definitely better than paperwork." Jace's first lesson aboard the Virulent began with getting punched in the face by a hologram. The training chamber was at least the size of a shuttle hangar, and filled with floating platforms, shifting walls, and something that looked suspiciously like a sentient punching bag. Aelari warriors moved through drills with the grace of poetry and the menace of a brewing thunderstorm. In the middle stood a tall instructor with skin like brushed steel and a permanent scowl etched across his angular face. "This," the instructor said, pointing to Jace without actually looking at him, "is the human." There was a collective pause. Several Aelari murmured in their native tongue. One outright laughed. Jace gave a little wave. "Hi. Yes, the very human. I bleed regularly and eat too many carbohydrates. Let's skip the traditional humiliation ritual and go straight to the part where I fake a muscle injury." The instructor turned. "You are Jace Marin. You have been assigned to Royal Guardian status. That makes you my problem. I get that a lot. You will train with us. You will fight with us. You will either evolve or be discarded." Quick question. When you say discarded, is that like kicked off the ship or more like dumped into space while unconscious? "Whichever saves fuel." He barked a command in Aelari, and one of the warriors stepped forward. Female, lithe, dangerous. Her ears were adorned with 3 silver rings, and her gaze said she'd dissect Jace just to see how he was put together. The instructor gestured. "Spar." Jace blinked. "Spar as in practice, or spar as in full contact regret?" The instructor stepped back. Jace didn't even see the first blow. One moment he was raising his arms, the next he was on the floor, blinking at a flickering ceiling panel and wondering if his jaw had always been detachable. "Okay," he coughed, sitting up. "New rule. If you're going to hit me that hard, at least buy me dinner first." The warrior offered no reaction. Jace stood, dusted himself off, and assumed what he hoped looked like a combat stance. It probably looked more like interpretive dance. He didn't win the spar, or the next one, or the next 17. By the end of the session, he'd been flipped, slammed, electroshocked, insulted in 3 dialects, and accidentally headbutted a sentient wall that refused to apologize. When he limped out of the chamber 2 hours later, he'd acquired a bruise shaped suspiciously like a shoe and the deep, haunting suspicion that his spleen had changed zip codes. The Queen was waiting for him in the observation gallery. "You are still alive," she noted, not looking up from the translucent data scroll in her hands. "Barely, but thanks for your overwhelming concern." She glanced over, arching one of those regal, terrifying eyebrows. "You are progressing." "I'm leaking. That's not progress. That's a medical concern. Your sarcasm frequency is increasing. Is that a good thing or a sign of internal bleeding? Both. He slumped into the seat opposite her. The gallery overlooks Arboretum, which contained exactly one earth tree, imported at tremendous cost. It was dying quietly in the corner. Jace sympathized. The Queen closed her scroll. Your body is weak, your techniques are primitive, but you react without hesitation. That is rare. Flattery? From you, I must be concussed. You saved my life, she said. That is not easily dismissed. He watched her for a moment. Why'd you really bring me here? Don't give me the whole life-death speech. I've seen those movies. She looked out at the Arboretum. There are factions within my people who see unity with humans as weakness. They believe emotion contaminates purpose. They believe I am already contaminated. You're trying to prove them wrong. No, she said. I am trying to outlast them. Later that evening, Jace's quarters decided to rebel. The Alari didn't do walls the way humans did. Every surface in his room shifted based on mood, voice commands, or apparently random whim. At exactly 2300 ship time, the ceiling began dripping what he could only describe as bioluminescent condensation. He poked the wall. It burped. Okay, he said aloud. This is not how adult housing works. The orb assistant hovered into view. You are interacting incorrectly with your habitat. I'm trying not to interact with it at all. You must establish neural harmony. I'd rather establish plumbing. The orb beeped. Advised solution, meditate. Next option. Reboot chamber core with vocal affirmation of unity. Jace stared. That's the dumbest. Fine, fine. Unity, unity, we are all one with the weird goop house. The wall solidified with a smug schlurk. Unbelievable, Jace muttered. The next morning, he was summoned to the strategy deck. It was filled with holograms of star systems, blinking fleet trajectories, and a suspicious number of angry-looking admirals. Saravan stood at the center, fingers steepled. She nodded to him. Jace Marin, you will accompany me on a diplomatic assignment to the Polari Nexus. He blinked. Is that one of those shake hands and pretend we don't hate each other missions, or one of those get shot at in exotic locales missions? Yes, he sighed. At least let me bring my med kit. We depart in 6 hours. He nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Hey, you said people think you're contaminated. What about you? What do you think? She didn't answer immediately. Then softly, I think it's too late to matter. He looked at her. For a moment, the queen of a star-spanning race looked very, very tired. Then the moment passed and she straightened. You may go. Jace left, wondering what exactly he'd gotten himself into, and why he wasn't more eager to get out. The Polari Nexus smelled like overcooked fish and wet circuitry, which was apparently the scent of diplomacy in this part of the galaxy. Jace followed Queen Saravan through the docking corridor, trying not to trip over the shifting floor panels. The station had been built by 6 different species with 7 incompatible engineering philosophies. Nothing was level. Nothing was symmetrical. The walls pulsed every few seconds like the station was breathing. He hated it. Remind me why I'm here again? He asked, adjusting the ill-fitting diplomatic robe someone insisted he wear. It was purple, sparkly, and had no pockets, clearly designed by someone who'd never tried to carry snacks discreetly. You are my guardian, Saravan said without looking at him. You are required to attend all high-risk negotiations. You think this counts as high risk? She stopped, turned slightly. The last Polari envoy we spoke to attempted to replace our ambassador's brain with a thought slug. Okay, fair. The main chamber of the Nexus resembled a vertical amphitheater carved into the shell of a meteor. Delegates floated in anti-grav seats at different heights, rotating slowly for dramatic. At the center hovered the Polari emissary, a 12-eyed translucent being with the voice of a haunted pipe organ. Saravan approached with regal grace. Jace approached with the certainty that he'd make at least 3 protocol mistakes before lunch. The emissary pulsed, its words projected directly into the minds of everyone present. Queen Saravan of the Alari, and your mammalian companion. Jace waved. Hi, Jace Marin, Mammal of the Year, 2 years running. There was an uncomfortable silence. One of the delegates emitted a wet, clicking sound that might have been laughter, or indigestion. Saravan didn't flinch. We are here to finalize the mineral rights agreement as per the Treaty of L'Oreal Depths. Agreement terms have changed, the emissary said, swirling slightly. We now require 20% more yield in exchange for trade neutrality. Seravan's eyes narrowed. Unacceptable. You already benefit from our stabilizers. This is extortion. Negotiation, the emissary corrected. I believe the word is blackmail, Jace muttered. You're just missing a ransom note and a mustache to twirl. The emissary's eyes blinked in a slow wave. The mammal speaks often. He does that, Seravan said. It is difficult to prevent. They argued for 2 hours. Jace tried to follow, but the diplomatic jargon eventually turned into a soup of mineral codes, territorial coordinates, and metaphors involving starbirds and fungal monarchs. He mostly nodded, smiled, and tried not to fall asleep. Then the bomb went off. Not a real one. A sonic disruptor, designed to incapacitate with high-frequency waves. It hit the chamber in a blast of static and pain. Delegates screamed. Some passed out. Others floated in awkward spirals. Jace dropped to one knee, clutching his head. I've had hangovers quieter than this. Seravan was already moving. She activated a small shield from her wristband, the pulse field cocooning her in violet shimmer. She yanked Jace inside the radius just as a second blast rippled through the chamber. Guards poured in. Chaos blossomed like bad graffiti. Jace looked at her. This wasn't in the brochure. Stay close, she said, and don't get killed. It would complicate paperwork. She drew a blade from her waist, slender, humming with encoded plasma, and cut down a cloaked figure lunging from the upper tier. The attacker collapsed in a hiss of dissolving armor. Jace ducked a thrown spike, grabbed a chair, and smacked another would-be assassin with a maneuver he liked to call the blind panic home run. It worked surprisingly well. The attackers retreated after 6 minutes and 32 seconds of mayhem. Jace knew because he'd spent the last 2 trying not to vomit into his robe. As the emergency lockdown engaged, Seravan stood among the wreckage, calm as ever. 6 dead, 9 injured, 1 chair irreparably damaged. Make that 2, Jace said, leaning on a smoking one-legged seat. I think this one's traumatized. Back aboard the Virulent, Seravan summoned her inner. The images of her advisors hovered in the command chamber, projected by the crystalline neural relay. They spoke in fast, clipped Ilari, but Jace caught words like glass crown, internal breach, and contamination. He leaned against the wall, sipping something the medical AI claimed was a protein recovery shake, but tasted like carbonated sadness. After the briefing, Seravan motioned for him to follow her to her private observatory. It overlooked the ship's quantum sails, which shimmered like butterfly wings in a field of stars. They knew we'd be there, she said. They knew the room layout, our schedules, our diplomatic codes. Jace frowned. Someone fed them intel. She nodded. Someone close. So what now? We hunt. Cool, Jace said. But when you say we, do you mean the royal we? Or the drag the mildly traumatized Earth guy into another mess we? Her silence was answer enough. Later that night, he tried to sleep. The wall played soothing harmonic frequencies designed by Ilari monks. They only made his headache worse. He sat up, pulled on a shirt, and found Seravan in the ship's central garden, of all places. She stood barefoot on a stone path, watching alien blossoms bloom in artificial moonlight. You don't sleep much, he said. I don't trust dreams. Afraid of what you'll see? Afraid of what I won't. They sat in silence for a while. Somewhere behind them, a maintenance droid got stuck in a vine and cursed softly in 5 languages. Jace looked at her. You ever think about just leaving? Disappearing into some quiet moon, running a noodle shop? Frequently. Any good at making noodles? I once boiled an enemy fleet in atmosphere. Does that count? I'll assume yes. She didn't laugh, but her eyes warmed just slightly. Then, more serious, she said, Thank you, for the chamber. You fought, despite the odds. I've never been great at odds, he said. But I'm good at getting hit and staying on my feet. That counts for something, right? Yes, she said. More than you know. The stolen dropship smelled like fear and burnt eggplant. The fear came from the Ilari pilot duct-taped to the cargo bay wall. The eggplant smell was apparently a side effect of flying a vessel powered by recycled methane coils. Jace didn't ask. He sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring out at the frozen planetoid ahead. Gray, uninhabited, and swirling with electromagnetic storms, it looked like a really bad vacation destination. Unless you were trying to track down a rogue faction of interstellar purists with a grudge against the Queen. In which case, 5 stars. Remind me what we're doing again? Jace asked, gripping the armrest as turbulence shook the ship like a maraca. "We're locating the Glass Crown's off-network communication hub," Saravan said from the pilot's chair, calmly flipping switches that made worrying sounds. "Then we dismantle it." "Quietly," Jace repeated. "With this ship, that smells like death and disappointment. You selected it." "I like the name. The Screaming Turnip has a certain charm." They entered the atmosphere sideways, mostly on purpose. The storm tried to peel the hull like a fruit. Jace screamed. Saravan didn't. The ship landed in what might generously be called a controlled crash. Jace's spine filed a formal complaint. As they stepped out into the frigid air, Saravan adjusted her breathing mask. Jace's refused to seal properly, so he applied space-grade duct tape and optimism. They trudged toward a jagged ridge, snow crunching underfoot. Halfway up, Saravan stopped. "There," she said, pointing to a faint shimmer against the rock. "The cloaking field." "You see that with your eyes?" "My implants. You have standard human limitations. I prefer the term delightfully analog." They breached the field with a small spike of anti-phase plasma. The cloak dropped to bunker surrounded by sensor arrays, and one very surprised sentry who looked up from his lunch blinked and then got punched in the face by Saravan before he could reach for his weapon. "Subtle," Jace whispered. "Efficient." Inside, the bunker was all rusted terminals, humming crystals, and the unmistakable sound of someone playing synth jazz over a speaker. They moved quietly, disabling cameras, overriding doors. At the central console, Saravan pulled up the data stream. "Encrypted," she said. "Allow me," Jace said, stepping forward and promptly being shocked by a defensive pulse field. He yelped. "Okay, step 1. Don't touch that." She rolled her eyes and input a rapid sequence of glyphs. The console shimmered, then opened. They scanned the files, location data, messages, manifestos written in the shrill tone of people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. One message caught Jace's eye. "Operative inside Virulinth. Royal Circle compromised. Prepare Phase 2. "That's bad, right?" "It's worse," she said. "They're going after the wormhole relay." Jace blinked. "That connects our side of space to Earth?" "Yes. That seems like something we should be very, very concerned about." "We are." An alarm blared. The screen turned red. "They know we're here," Jace said. "Of course. Did you trip a silent alarm?" "No, I tripped a very loud one." 5 hostiles stormed the room. Jace ducked. Saravan didn't. Her blade sang, cutting through the first 3 before the others realized they'd already lost. Jace tackled the last one, mostly by falling on him. After tying the attackers together with cable cords and questionable knots, Jace grinned. "We make a good team." Saravan arched a brow. "You bled on my cloak. Teamwork." Back on the Screaming Turnip, Jace patched the nav system with chewing gum and sarcasm. They launched into orbit just as the bunker exploded behind them in a blossom of blue fire. Saravan didn't look back. As the ship limped toward the Virulinth, Jace leaned against the bulkhead. "You think they'll try something at the summit?" "Yes." "You think we'll be in the middle of it?" "Undoubtedly." "You think we can win?" "I think we have no choice." "See, that's why I follow you around," Jace said. "Your pep talks are almost as good as your assassination blocking." They landed in the Virulinth secondary bay, greeted by 2 medics, a security officer, and a janitorial drone that looked very judgmental. Inside the war room, Saravan addressed her commanders. The data from the Glass Crown base confirmed the infiltration. One of her own advisors was feeding intel. Faces turned grim, eyes narrowed. "I want full neural scans on everyone with access to core systems," she ordered, "and triple encrypt the summit security plan. I want to know what they know before they do." Jace pulled her aside afterward. "You sure you can trust anyone on this ship?" "No." "You trust me?" "No." "Ouch. I rely on you. That's different." He sighed. "One of these days, you're going to say something nice, and it's going to physically hurt you." "I look forward to the challenge." That night, Jace sat alone in his quarters, staring at the encrypted message he'd copied from the console. One line repeated itself. "When the stars align and the gate collapses, the false queen will fall." He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it sounded like the kind of thing that ended with a bang and someone losing a planet. He tapped his communicator. "Hey," he said, "remind me to never volunteer for anything again." The orb assistant beeped. "Reminder set, never volunteer. Also, you have blade training at 0600. Cancel it. Denied. Worth a shot." He rolled onto the alien bedding and closed his eyes. Only 3 days until the summit, and somehow he knew the worst hadn't even started. The summit began ceremonial silence, 3 interpreters having nervous breakdowns, and a minor explosion in the refreshment sector when someone tried to warm up gelatinous squid cakes too fast. Jace stood behind Queen Seravan on the Nexus stage, dressed in formal battle robes that itched like cosmic regret. His new blade, forged from dark matter composite, hung at his side like a sarcastic sidekick. Delegates from every major power ringed the central hall. Some floated, some crawled. One had to be carried in on a hover pallet due to being composed entirely of gas and ambition. Everyone had an agenda, everyone had suspicions, and Seravan had a target, the traitor. She hadn't told Jace the name. Not directly. She didn't have to. He'd seen the way her eyes narrowed whenever Advisor Velen spoke, the way her tone shifted, clipped and colder. Velen, with his perfect diction and increasingly bad hairpieces, had always seemed too polished, too curated, like a hologram pretending to be a real person. The speech began. Seravan stepped forward, terrifying, and spoke about unity, peace, shared futures, and very subtly, the consequences of betrayal. As she spoke, Jace scanned the crowd. The glass crown wouldn't just leak information. They'd make a statement. Sure enough, the station lights flickered. The temperature dropped 3 degrees. A soundless pulse hit the chamber, undetectable to most. But Jace had spent enough time getting kicked in the head to recognize a kinetic disruptor field charging. He moved without thinking. Left, he muttered. Seravan shifted half a step. A plasma dart fired from the rafters missed her by inches and struck the floor with a shriek of energy. Panic erupted. Delegates screamed. Shields activated. Jace drew his blade, yanked Seravan behind a column, and yelled, "If anyone brought snacks, now's a great time to share." 3 attackers descended in pulse armor, firing indiscriminately. Station guards responded, but they were too slow. Jace lunged, intercepting one midair with a shoulder tackle that sent them both skidding across the floor. "Just once," he grunted, dodging a stun beam. "I'd like to attend a peaceful summit, with cupcakes." Seravan deflected a plasma bolt with her blade and hurled a throwing disc into the second attacker's visor. The third raised a cannon, only to freeze mid-pull as a stun spike lodged in his spinal node. Behind him stood Advisor Velen. For half a second, Jace thought he'd been wrong. Then Velen smiled. "Thank you for leading them here," he said, voice silky with betrayal. It made everything easier. He pressed a command key on his wrist. The station began to hum. Systems flickered. The wormhole relay spun faster than it should. "You're collapsing the gate," Seravan said. "You'll kill thousands." "Only those too weak to adapt," Velen replied. "And once you're gone, the Alari can become pure again." Jace stepped forward. "You know, every time someone uses the word pure in a political context, bad things happen." Velen laughed. "You're just a joke, a broken man with good reflexes." "Yeah, but I'm very consistent." He threw the blade. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't graceful. It spun end over end like a carnival stunt, but it hit Velen's arm and knocked the control pad free. Seravan moved in a blur, disabling him with a single strike that folded his limbs like bad origami. The wormhole continued to destabilize. That part, unfortunately, wasn't a bluff. "We have one shot," Seravan said, analyzing the controls. "We can reroute the collapse into the outer ring, but it will destroy the summit hub." Jace nodded. "Let's do it." "You'll die." He shrugged. "I've had worse Mondays." She hesitated. He looked at her. "Hey, I saved your life, right?" "Yes." "Then let me do it again." They worked side by side, patching alien code with override protocols, cross-wiring relay dampeners. Jace didn't understand half of it. He just followed her lead, trusting that if this was the end, it would at least be a good one. The final pulse rocked the chamber. Light bled from the walls. Jace threw the last switch. Then everything went white. He woke up 3 days later in the Virulent's medical bay, wrapped in nanoweave, ribs reknit, limbs aching in that familiar, still not dead kind of way. The orb assistant hovered over him. "You survived again," it said, almost disapproving. "Sorry to disappoint. Statistics indicate you should be a smear on an asteroid. I'm very inefficient at dying." Seravan entered, flanked by no guards, no fanfare. Just her. Her eyes locked on his, unreadable. "You did it," he said. "We did. You're welcome." She walked to his bedside. "You should be dead." "I've been hearing that a lot." You rerouted the relay into a stabilization loop using a method that violates 17 known physical laws. Yeah, well, you taught me to improvise. There was silence between them. Then she said, Velen is gone. The glass crown is scattered. The summit has been rescheduled. Let me guess. New location, higher security. Correct. He sat up slowly. So, what happens now? Saravan studied him. The bond is fulfilled. You saved me. Again, you are no longer obligated to serve. He blinked. Wait, that's it? We get matching scars, save 2 civilizations, and now I just go home? Back to moving cargo and arguing with vending machines? You may choose your path, she said. But, I have grown accustomed to your presence. Jace smiled. That's dangerously close to affection. It's closer than you think. He stood, wincing. So, what if I don't want to leave? Then you stay, not as my guardian, but as something else. He took her hand. I think I'd like that. Outside the viewport, the stars shifted. The wormhole shimmered, stable again, gleaming like a second sun. A new path opened between 2 worlds, no longer just allies, but something more, tied together by blood, sacrifice, and one very stubborn human who never knew when to quit. Jace squeezed her hand and grinned. Just promise me next time there's a summit, I get to give the speech. She didn't smile, but her eyes did. We'll see, she said. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to my channel and like it for more videos.